Of
webcam microphone up close. Webcam microphone up
close. At the age of 19 in 1962, she was a...
See, but I have the files. I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? Pistols and fondle slab of choice. I don't know when that was. It doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not just Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It's hard to get real information because seriously, they don't want you to have degrees to sources whenever I try to prove out. It's not. If you expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to be sadly disappoint another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty old man.
Really? You can't be serious. Is this really how you want things to be? Come on. More hooker, eruptions? Eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers kind of...
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from Pima Region 2. Within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America, we bring you the Ochelli Effect.
It's like, damn sure, no, I'm an original. We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years,
That's that.
For a 19-year-old girl to eventually get up to gumption to put these things out.
Well, that is certainly that, and this is the Ochelli Effect on Saturday night, live on UCY.TV radio. So, want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight, across the interesting internet web, as it were. We definitely are going to have an interesting show tonight. What I have for you is a whistleblower and a man of interest who is going to tell his story regarding the Iraq War, regarding torture of what they call detainees, et cetera, this kind of stuff. And his name, of course, is Frank Gregory Ford. And an interesting story in and of itself, is this man's career, his experiences over there. And also, when we put this in context with the current situation in Iraq, in Syria, etc., we're going to find that this does have some bearing on current events as well. Now, normally, when I try to bring you guys a witness to history kind of interview, I'm very careful about who it is I bring on. I go through a lot of trouble to make sure that I have double and triple checked information, et cetera, et cetera. But this is going to be a little bit difficult because, after all, only based on lawsuits and things like this and revelations which have come out over time, we have to view this particular statement, this set of facts as presented by Mr. Ford, in a very unique kind of light. And again, this is one of those situations where I think that it has a great deal to do with exactly the effects of on our society, the things that are done in our name, the concept of what is being done in our name, exactly how this affects us, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I do believe I've just brought Mr. Ford on the line again, and thankfully everything seems to be connected. Good evening, Mr. Ford. How are you?
Yes, good evening, Chuck. How are things back there?
Well, they came together sort of at the last moment, but definitely did. So, very, very happy to have you on the show tonight. And I've got to say that I do take the time to study a lot of these events myself. It's very difficult being a civilian, a researcher of sorts, because of all of the propaganda that is fed to us regarding a lot of the situations involved in this Middle Eastern conflict that we're dealing with right now. And what you have to say, although your experiences are not extremely recent, have a great deal to do with what it is we are still looking at in that part of the world, namely in Iraq and Syria at this point in time. And, I definitely am looking very forward to this, and was telling my listeners that I took time to go through the information to try and verify and basically, get a real handle on a lot of the things that you were saying, which I found rather shocking, in a couple of different ways. So first of all, let's just begin this way, and we'll make it nice and easy. I mean, you went into Iraq, with a whole lot of qualifications, which there was some confusion and some sort of nonsense which had been put out by people that were trying to discredit you about this. But very sensibly, when I discussed this with you personally off the air, you explained to me very well exactly what it was that you were qualified to do, and what it was you were sent to do over there in Iraq. And I'd like to kind of just start out that way. I mean, first of all, you were a sergeant at the time, right?
Yes, I was. Just a humble sergeant. Okay, but actually, since I was in the intelligence business, the intelligence operative business, I wore no rank at all, and that's for a reason. All right. So when you operate as an intelligence operative in that environment, you deal with generals, you deal with admirals, you deal with politicians, and they like to think that they're dealing with somebody of comparable rank. And in the intelligence business, it's they don't pay you for your education, they don't pay you for your experience. They just pay you whatever they think they can pay you and get away with it. So that's why the intelligence business is not a long-term hiring agency. So anyway, now I was wondering, Chuck, it's quite a jump from September 9/11, all right, to when I got on the plane in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, all right. I wanted to say hello to everybody in North Carolina there, but you think your listeners would like to hear how I first came to be in Iraq, and some of the very brave and incredibly amazing intelligence operations that almost saved America from 9/11. Do you think your listeners would like to hear that?
Well, yeah, I definitely would like to hear about that. Which people that listen to my show generally would be well aware of what you're going to bring up. And I think it's definitely one of those sort of, hey, here's another confirmation, about the idea that we knew ahead of time that something was very wrong here. Now, people interpret it all different ways, but this has been one of those things that's been seized upon in the 9/11 truth movement, that I think has been misunderstood, and in some cases there's sort of a lack of confirmation. But I do find it interesting that you have something to say about that, and then we could get into exactly how you found your way into Iraq as a counterintelligence operative. So please, go right ahead.
Sure. Okay. Well, now, quite often, after being in the business for 3 decades, quite often you don't know when you're staring history right in the eye. Okay. It's quite often it happens later on. All right. My training is I was an archaeology major in college, and then I actually had a pre-med concentration, and so I ended up with the government having several medical, what I call military occupation specialties, and like four of them, and I had gone to a naturopathic medical school, and then I had several intelligence operative MOSs. All right, so I'm basically qualified to do a whole lot of things, and some of the stuff you even see, in James Bond, movies. So needless to say, one of the things that is important when brain, right down to your fingernails. And so, to introduce 9/11, 9/11 wasn't 9/11 at the time. Well, one day I was sitting in a classroom, and this was in an intelligence training facility. Everybody would know where it is if I said it, but it trains more intelligence operatives than anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, and it's out here in the Western United States. All right, so we were just wrapping up a course, and the senior instructor came in, white-haired gentleman, distinguished, looked like he could be from a Schweppes commercial, bitter lemon commercial, and he came in and said, "Okay, all right, knock out the talk, sit down and shut up." Okay, he never spoken to us. We're all grown-ups, okay, but he never spoken to us like that, and he was very serious. And we had somebody by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer, okay, in my opinion, probably one of the bravest, smartest, toughest people in the business, okay, in America, who should be the president, not some cocaine-sniffing, draft-dodging wimp, all right, which we've had more than our fair share of. He is the smartest, and most folks will see him as a Fox News spokesman. Okay, he was on Fox News last time I saw him. All right, he had a group called Able Danger. He was commanding Able Danger, and I hope there's some people looking this stuff up so they don't take my word for it. All right, so Able Danger was the operation, and we were informed right then and there that we had to go home, and after this briefing, we were to go home, make sure our wills and our business and our affairs were in order, because we might not be coming back from the assignment we're about to receive. And the assignment was something like this. Okay, now this might sound hair-raising to some people, but when you're in the intelligence business, operative business, you get these assignments all the time, and everybody says, "Oh, yeah, hey, go straighten things out with the wife and kids, or the kids, or your grandparents, or whoever, the IRS or whoever." But usually it amounts to hardly anything. But this was very insistent. They were very clear, and they said there were two groups of operatives that they'd been tracking at that point for a couple of years. And they had tracked this group of operatives, okay, and they were terrorists, all right, terrorist Al-Qaeda operatives. And they were in the United States, okay, at that moment, okay. They were in the United States. They were tracking them. And they said, okay, and the briefing was that they are going to strike the United States. And by the way, this was, so we get our times straight here. This was July.
What I was going to ask you was exactly when this was, because this is extremely relevant.
July, okay, and I'm not stuttering, I'm not mispronouncing, July of 2000, all right? But we were told that the two groups were going to hijack airplanes, and of course, when they said hijack, we all kind of looked at each other and scratched our heads. What are we going back to the days of Cuba and Castro, when people were hijacking a plane just to fly to Cuba and ask for asylum? But that's what seemed odd about it, was they were hijacking planes, and they were going to use them as guided missiles to hit targets, specifically the World Trade Center. All right, the World Trade Center. And we know, everybody knows what happened, by now. Unless you're in a coma for the last 15 years, you know what happened. And the next group of targets were going to be, and this is the exact wording, select targets around the D.C. area. All right? There was no mistaking it, no ambivalence about any of this. Okay? That's what they were going to hit. And with these hijacked planes. So anyway, And of course, intelligence operatives, before George Bush, there used to be something called laws in this country that protect the citizens of this country against pervasive totalitarian intrusions of the government. Well, that was before George Bush, okay? And of course, those laws have been pretty much swept aside conveniently, all right? When you're in the intelligence business and you see governments fall, you see countries dismantle themselves, these are indicators of what's coming, all right? And we all saw that with this country. So anyway, we were told, go home, okay, take care of things. Couple of folks raised their hand and said, well, look, okay, hey, we cannot operate in this country. There's something called posse comitatus laws that prevent us from gathering intelligence on U.S. citizens. We cannot do this. And then the response was, look, these people have had their passports. These terrorists have had their passports stamped at the CIA field station, Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Okay, and I confirmed this later myself when I spoke to the second in command of the field station, Saudi Arabia, and he said he had been fired when he refused to stamp those passports with visas. All right. Now, the person who overrode that warning and stamped those visas is now head of the CIA. All right. Make no misunderstanding about it. He's head of the CIA. All right. And so, there was some real consternation going on in the group. Okay. And then the next question was, has the FBI been advised? And of course, the FBI had been advised was the answer. In response, the FBI has to know everything about domestic terrorism. Okay, they can operate, they can pursue terrorists on U.S. soil. Intelligence operatives cannot. We have to operate outside U.S. boundaries.
Well, yeah, let's put this in context, because after all, now we have the Department of Homeland Security, which folded a bunch of agencies which were domestically based into one, sort of umbrella. We have, of course, we know from the CIA's own charter that they are not permitted, or according to their charter anyway, they're not permitted to conduct intelligence operations on U.S. soil as well. And these kind of rules also apply to military intelligence, right?
That's correct.
So there you go. And meanwhile, you were being briefed on this, and I'm not even making a judgment as to why it was you were briefed on this, or exactly what the meaning of this is, because this unravels a whole huge nexus of, at the very least, cooperation in some ways with individuals who are ostensibly on our side, let's just say. I mean, I'm oversimplifying, I know, but the thing is that some of the people that should have been on the alert to prevent individuals from entering the United States, to prevent certain things from happening, obviously didn't. But meanwhile, they were briefing you guys on these guys, and that's 14 months, if I'm counting correctly, before that Tuesday in 2001. So that in and of itself is awfully fascinating to me.
Yes, you're absolutely correct in your calendar days, and it was a Tuesday. And the reason why I know that is because I had actually attended a meeting over the weekend at my intelligence unit, and I was handed the keys, okay, to my intelligence unit, and they said, okay, fine, you got the duty this coming week. You open up. And I said, well, so I have tomorrow off, correct, which was Monday. And they said, yes, you have tomorrow off. Open this building Tuesday morning. And so I was headed down the highway on Tuesday morning to open the building. And I noticed that there were highway patrol just going everywhere, California Highway Patrol, and with their lights on, but they weren't pulling anybody over, and like they were trying to clear lanes. And I received a call my better half, and she said, "You are not going to believe what's on the television." Okay, what's on? The Pentagon was just attacked. The Pentagon, what, a bunch of nutcases attacked the Pentagon? Who in their right mind would attack a building that has 7 layers of defense and has close to $1 trillion of automation built in against any kind of aerial or ground attack built into it? Who would be that stupid? Okay, well, it had been attacked. And the World Trade Center, WTC, had been attacked. Mm-hmm. And so I rushed into my office, turned on our CNN screen. Okay, any decent intelligence operation always has CNN going, by the way. And
yeah, I won't lie, but go ahead.
And of course, then I had my Starbucks. We support death squads, in Indonesia, coffee cup, and I watched just as the second plane struck. What was it? The North Tower? I think it was the North Tower. It struck the second tower, and I couldn't believe it either. And of course, my phone, went crazy, and immediately, the environment and the intelligence community, just went completely, like a hornet's nest, went completely abuzz.
Well,
and
right. Now, here's the interesting part about that. Now, when you were watching that second plane strike, if you were already informed of the Pentagon, then that means you were watching a replay of it on CNN, which, of course, all of the news channels were replaying it constantly.
Right, exactly.
Right. And here's the thing also, at that time, there was also a whole lot of sort of, I don't know if it was misinformation or just sort of the chaos of the moment, but there were reports that the Capitol may have been bombed. There were, I only know this because I recently went back over that footage once again to examine the chronology of when this stuff was delivered to the mainstream media. And to put it in context again, you were on the West Coast, so you're on your way into work at probably a little bit after 6 a.m. when this was being related to you, because it happened, like I said again, just after 9 a.m. On the East Coast. So this all makes perfect sense to me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I started. When I got into the office and could actually calm down and watch this thing happening, I started thinking, and I started hearing stories about how the planes had been allowed to come into New York City unchallenged, and they had been hijacked but flown, a third of the way across the United States, and then turned around, and then brought back and crashed into these select targets. And I started thinking, whoa, now, hold on a sec. Now, we have the finest air defense system on the planet. Okay, how did that happen? How did a plane, and I remembered this was the Payne-Stewart factor, what I call the Payne-Stewart factor. Payne-Stewart was a famous golfer who just a few weeks before, just 2 or 3 weeks before 9/11, had been on his private jet. It was like a Learjet or Gulfstream. And all of a sudden, his plane, the communications went dead, and his plane was flying all by itself, and it had gone 2 degrees off of its, what they call a vortex tracking line. And it had deviated 2 degrees, and within 10 minutes, there were 2 National Guard F-16 jet fighters on it, looking into the cockpit, and they could see that the oxygen system had failed and knocked everybody out on the plane. And then within 20 minutes, there was 4, 5 planes, and they're surrounding Payne-Stewart's plane, and of course they escorted it and it crashed in the countryside somewhere. Again, of course, it killed the people on board, but the point being is that how could 5 lumbering, fully loaded with people and fuel planes tracking on their what are called Victor Skyways undergo a hijacking, and then in a country completely crisscrossed with terminal control areas, and have those planes lost and have them turn around and fly into select targets, something wasn't adding up here. All right, something wasn't adding up immediately. All right, in my mind. Okay. So anyway, but of course, immediately I had bigger fish to fry, like a command, demanding to know, who we had alerted and so forth, and initiated our sequence, our activation sequence. And of course, we went into immediate training, and for quite a while we were in training. All right, we were still trying to figure out, what was going on, how we were going to be implemented as an intelligence unit, and then so the time came, and we still weren't tracking politically with a country called Iraq. All right, everybody knew about Iraq in the first Gulf War, but all of a sudden there was this talk came out of the blue. Why are we going to Iraq? Everybody was kind of scratching their heads.
Well, right.
What does Iraq have to do with this?
I certainly did at that time, and found a few other things absolutely ridiculous. This was the first time that I had ever heard the term failure of intelligence. This was the first time, because they said, well, this was obviously an intelligence failure. The story was sort of floated that the intelligence agencies were not in contact with one another, and therefore they weren't sharing information. This, of course, like I said, led to the need supposedly for the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, because after all, you had to have an umbrella agency to sort of control the interactions between these domestic agencies, right? But also, the other terrible thing to me that came out of this was not only that, but the I don't know if it was intentional, but it seemed to be this sort of acquiescence to sort of the desire of creating the Middle Eastern enemy, what I call the Al Qaeda boogeyman, because this was a problem. Okay, it became all of a sudden acceptable, and even on a social level, in the aftermath of 9/11, to be hostile to anybody that you thought could possibly be Arab, and et cetera, et cetera. And both of these themes, the failure of intelligence, and also, the need for the sentiment to be sort of, in the population against Middle Eastern people, let's just say, both of these things come back into play later, don't they?
That's absolutely correct. And what was happening was, it was kind of what we call in the business punctuated equilibrium. It's all of a sudden these things are coming at us. And it's usually a government agency telling us this, okay? But they didn't track with anything that had gone on before. Iraq had been our ally. People, hopefully most of your audience has a memory, okay? I'm amazed at how few Americans have memories these days, okay? Iraq was our ally, all right? We had armed them extensively in the fight against Iran, all right? And we had quite an operation. People forget. I don't forget, because of what happened to me in Iraq, that it was Dick Cheney who shook the hand of Saddam Hussein and immediately sent weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction were shipped. They were reconfigured. This is for the VX P400 bomb casings. They were shipped immediately from Fort Rucker, Alabama, to Pine Bluffs, Arkansas, where they were armed. And from Pine Bluffs, Arkansas, they were railroaded to the Houston waterway. This might tell everybody what happened, because I found these weapons in a bunker in Iraq, all right? And I'll elaborate on what I found, okay? And this is part of the court case, as I spoke to you about earlier, Chuck.
Well, yeah, and well, before you go any further with that, though, let's just put this in context, because here's the interesting thing. We have all been fed the idea that, there were no weapons of mass destruction discovered in Iraq. This was a failure of intelligence again. They underestimated or misunderstood what actually was present, et cetera, et cetera. This was a mistake. We went over there with a legitimate desire to defend our country from these individuals who had access to or were in the process of creating these weapons of mass destruction. I mean, this is I had seen the term many times before, but this is sort of how it was introduced into the lexicon of the general populace, and this is the thing. What you're saying is, oh no, it wasn't that there were none discovered. This wasn't a failure of intelligence. You yourself witnessed these things.
Not only did I witness these weapons of mass destruction, I discovered, along with another agent on another team, we discovered the 29 missing registered. By the way, these weapons weren't just created in a vacuum. It was they had bills of lading from the Carlyle Group. Okay, now does everybody know who the Carlyle Group is? When you say Carlyle Group, that means one thing: Bush family. All right. And
most notably, this came out, and this is something that you can even find in sort of more mainstream sources. Even Michael Moore, is somebody I don't agree with at all, made a good point about the Bushes and the Bin Ladens both actually being involved with the Carlyle Group. This is part of the public record. There are many ties to the Carlyle Group and military contracting, et cetera, and that's a whole nexus one can get into for themselves. But let's think about the significance of this for a moment. You're talking about, at the time, George W. Bush occupying the White House, and the Carlyle Group is one way or another involved in this situation with these weapons of mass destruction. So let's just make sure we don't gloss right over that, right?
No. When I was standing in a bunker, underground bunker in Balad, by the way, Balad. All right, Iraq aficionados know exactly where that is. That's AKA Camp Anaconda, AKA Mortarville. All right, and one of my sources had been the commander of the bomber wing who was dropping those weapons on the Kurds, number one, the Kurds and Kurdistan, and he dropped those during the Anfal campaign, and he dropped the same type of weapons on the Iranians, all right, the Iranians during the Iran-Iraq War, especially on the what are called the Majnoon Islands, okay, near the Gulf, okay, the Shuttle Waterway and the Majnoon Islands, all right. Those weapons killed hundreds of thousands of people, and those same weapons that when I'm standing in this unbelievably hot bunker, all right, and my source, who was the commander of this fighter bomber wing, okay, said, look, get these things out of here. You people just invaded our country on the basis of weapons of mass destruction that you sold to us. You sold us these weapons, all right? Get them out of here so you can get the hell out of here, so we can get back to putting our country back together again and living, all right? And that makes sense to me, okay? It's about how we'd feel if Iraq invaded the U.S. and said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to torture your people. We're going to kick the daylights out of you folks. We're going to really screw things up. And then we're going to leave and create a power vacuum where some group can come in and start cutting people's heads off on CNN, okay, for entertainment. We'd feel the same way, okay?
And let's put this in context. What year was this that you were in this bunker and discovered this?
I can't ever forget this year. It was 2003. It was that was the last part of April, first part of May, 2003, and standing there with my source. By the way, in the intelligence business, it doesn't happen often. For the most part, intelligence work is so boring it makes your teeth ache. Okay, I mean, most intelligence work will make a styrofoam cup look interesting, but this was one of the times I thought, as I'm walking into this bunker, we had to. The entrance was on the surface, and it was one of those ostensible openings where you'd walk right by it if you didn't know it was there. And there was a stairwell going down into darkness. I thought, okay, all right, Greg, you've had it. Okay, he's either taking you into, you're going to into an episode where you're going to star in CNN getting your head sawn off, or you're going to walk into a booby trap and you're going to get yourself blown to bits. Okay, and so that's what I was expecting, and so I walked down with this colonel, and I walked down, and he said, okay, here they are. And I said, well, how do you get these things out? And he said, when we walk in, look up at the ceiling. And there were bomb doors, hinged bomb doors, okay, ceiling bomb doors where that could be lifted with cranes hydraulically, and these weapons pulled out. So we walk in, and there's all these crated packages. Each package was about 15 feet long, 2.5 feet wide, 2.5 feet high. And the thing that got me was, sitting right on the floor was a Russian testing kit, chemical testing kit. And I froze right there. Even though I had my mask on me, I knew that what was ever in those canisters was big and nasty and could kill me in a split second. And I was correct, okay? And it turned out to be, and I want everybody to listen, okay? Usually I get the Joe Six-Packs calling in saying, oh, this is unpatriotic. You're talking about this, okay? These weapons were not supposed to be in Iraq, all right? These weapons were weapons of mass destruction, all right? And the Bush administration had been, unknown to us, had been undergoing something called the Great Bush Document Purge. Okay, it was raging as we were in Iraq, entering Iraq. All documents connecting the Bush HW Senior to the Hussein regime were being purged, located, and destroyed. Okay, shredded as fast as they could find them. On an average of 65 documents a day were being shredded, okay? So, obviously, walking in to this facility, excuse me a moment, walking into this underground bunker, I realized, OMG, what is this? When I see Carlisle shipping documents inside plastic taped containers attached to the sides of each case. Okay, what is going on here? All right, I'm dumb, but I'm not stupid. Okay, I knew. In fact, when I was a kid, remember cartoons where a coyote was chasing the roadrunner, and roadrunner would out dodge him or outfox him, and the coyote would come to a skidding stop, and he turned into a sucker, giant sucker. Well, that's what I felt like, okay, inside that room. All right. And I realized that these 29 weapons were the weapons that the Hans Blix inspection teams, international inspection teams, were looking for in Iraq. They wanted these weapons. Okay, so all I could do and think to do was to detach one of the dispersal doors. These P400 bomb casings, they have to pressure up, and then the VX/GF okay, cyclosarin / VX, okay, probably the deadliest compound on the face of the earth, next to radiation, okay, from a bomb. These things could pressure up, okay, so they disperse out the back door, okay, this dispersal door. So I took the door off, and what is on the door? A general supply number stamped with a registration number stamped on the dispersal door, okay. Every single weapon had a general supply number, okay. That's the GSN number is how you order an item. You can order anything in the government you want. And obviously you could order weapons of mass destruction if you want. So anyway, I took the dispersal door and the documents. You know, I couldn't take all the documents, and I immediately returned to my command. Okay, the infamous command now, by the way, called the 205th. Anybody who in your audience who is a torture aficionado of Abu Ghraib prison knows the 205th, a military intelligence brigade. Okay.
Well, let me ask you something before we get into that, because I'm curious. What was the reason? Because they had to have had an objective. I mean, you weren't sent there to retrieve these weapons in the first place, right? I mean, you were sent there for a different purpose? No,
we were sent there to find weapons of mass destruction. That's what we were looking for.
So that was literally what you were charged with doing, that particular mission, let's just say. That's what you were supposed to be doing, and that's what you found.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
Oh, okay. Now, in counterintelligence work, most people, you know, it's kind of hard to tell by the name counterintelligence, but our mission is to recruit sources, foreign sources, and they can be anything from a local sheep herder to a high-level general to a high-level politician. And in the past, we've even recruited popes, okay, into the business. All right. So we've recruited lamas from Tibet and popes, into the counterintelligence business. So what we were looking for was people that would give us what's called force protection, would give us information that would say, okay, look, you are going to have this attack on you right now. This is, or in a month or a week or a day. These people are doing this on you, okay? Al-Qaeda is here, and they're going to go blow up the Golden Mosque at Escanaya in Samarra, and here's what's going to happen to you folks, okay? That's who we try to recruit, okay? And with that in mind, I recruited the person who was the colonel of this fighter bomber wing, who took me to exactly the site where what we were looking for, which was CNN news material, and should have flashed, and which was very, very strange, Chuck, okay, and your listeners, it should have flashed around the world instantly, okay, that we had found weapons of mass destruction, all right? Now, forget government semantics about reproducible weapons of mass destruction or weapons of mass destruction that were ready to be fired at any moment type of, a weapon. No. Forget all the semantics that have now evolved out of this ridiculous situation.
Well, right, because we were treated to the stories of mobile labs and Chemical Ali and all these other individuals who were supposed to be part of the infrastructure regarding them developing their own weapons, et cetera, et cetera. We were there to dismantle their organization. And just to clarify one other thing really quickly, intelligence assets are not limited to governments or even political figures, sometimes even local criminals, like you said, even sheep herders, anybody who seems to have something useful to offer.
Knowledge, right. Mm-hmm. And it's easier said than done to figure out who that is. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
when I was operating in Central America, everybody's trying to be sinister in Central America. Everybody's trying to look important in a sinister way. Okay, everybody wants you to think that they're part of an intelligence operation somehow, some way. Okay, but the folks that I found that knew the most about what was going on were the street kids. Okay, the street kids who ran the streets, kept an eye on everybody. Okay, and I ended up paying them to keep my hubcaps attached to my car. By the way, it wasn't an Aston Martin; it was a Ford Escort. Okay, and they don't give you Aston Martins. Okay, that's only in James Bond. But it was a Ford Escort, and I managed to keep my hubcaps attached by paying the street urchins. And surprise, they were the best source of information I think I've ever had. Forget these stuffy generals that get drunk at cocktail parties telling you something. They hardly know anything themselves. It's usually the unexpected in the intelligence business, and you have to have years of experience to spot these people. So anyway, I took the pressure door, dispersal door, back to commanding officer, and I took the documents, and and your listeners should listen to this, a very strange thing happened then. Okay, I was expecting an attaboy or a, hey, this is great, okay, or this is wonderful, we can pack up our things and get the hell out of this hot, miserable place, okay? Mm-hmm. Oh, no, that didn't happen at all. Something much more strange happened, okay? It was this kind of an embarrassed silence came into the room. Oh, these are American weapons of mass destruction? Yes, they are. Here they are. Okay, let's get these things and get the hell out of here. Okay, that was my take on it. All right, and I was immediately shown the door. Okay, here's your hat. Now get the hell out of here. Okay, and I expected to see a release on CNN worldwide within minutes. Okay, CNN was there with us. Okay, I mean, until I'd heard all stories about how CNN, they dress up in body armor and they look around, before they make a broadcast because there's incoming mortar rounds coming at any moment and all this kind of jazz. Okay, well, until I'd seen how they do things, I wouldn't have believed it, but it was true. Okay, so no release from CNN was forthcoming, and I was notified the next day that British technical intelligence was on the way, and there's actually film footage of this. Okay, film footage, if it hasn't been destroyed yet. Okay, film footage of these weapons of mass destruction, U.S.-made P-400, reconfigured in Fort Rucker, Alabama. Doesn't get much more American than that. Okay, it's shipped on the USS Wabash from the waterways of Houston, to Spain, from Spain to Turkey, and then trucked into Iraq across the border. All right. Placed in the hands of the Mukhabarat. And by the way, we need to talk about ISIS and the Mukhabarat. But the Mukhabarat is the intelligence operational arm of Hussein. Everything we see today going on in Syria and Iraq is being controlled by Mukhabarat. Okay? So anyway, and I was basically shown the door. Okay, get lost. Okay, don't ask about this stuff anymore. And the word was that the GSN numbers were confirmed as being exactly what they were, and they were on the registries of the Central Command's weapons logs. Okay, the Central Command, which basically runs things, okay, in the Eastern Hemisphere, has all their weapons registered, and and they immediately went into a denial mode. Okay, yes, those weapons were on their registration log, but they didn't have any weapons like this. Okay, I think that's how the Army deals with things like this. Oh yeah, we did that. We're responsible, but we didn't really do it. See, so yeah, kind of like the Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah. Okay,
well, there were legal ramifications connected to distribution of VX and these chemicals at the time, right? I mean, so to claim full responsibility for this would have been a problem, right?
Well, yes, especially when they're connected to a sitting president sitting in the Oval Office of the United States that actually put us into this position, launched us into this useless, bloody war, okay, and we'd already had Afghanistan roaring, okay. Yes, that's the embarrassing point, okay, behind all of this. How does one explain that these documents, where the bills of lading that have the father of the sitting president, who had been a president himself, all right, all over the bills of lading, okay? The name was all over the bills of lading, the Carlyle Group, all right? How does one explain that, okay? Big embarrassment. And so what happened then was I was given orders, okay, all right, that's just the way things go in the intelligence business. And the weapons were destroyed by an mobile arc furnace, which we did not have, by the way. It was the British Technical Intelligence NBC disposal unit that destroyed these weapons. They were gone the next day. No announcement was made. The Hans Blix weapons inspection teams were not notified about these weapons, and I was sent to a place called Samara. And Samara, for those who pay the slightest bit of attention to ISIS, okay, Samara is basically the capital of the ISIS operation right now. Okay, there's, and I know I'm jumping ahead, but I ended up as in the intelligence operational area of Samara, the Golden City of Samara. When you open the Bible and you look up to Golden City, you'll see Samara. Okay, and it hasn't changed much. It's one of the oldest cities on Earth, 5,000 years old, and I was placed there with my other intelligence operatives in a burned-out police station which no longer exists because it was blown flat with a car bomb, and I was in this massive graveyard, about a 2,000-acre graveyard, all right, which was one of the great wonders of the world, this graveyard. So anyway, I was sent there, and I thought, okay, all right, this is the way I'm going to spend the rest of my time quietly in this quiet little city called Samara. Well, it wasn't to be. Okay, it just wasn't to be. History, I can say now, Chuck, and to your listeners, history was really capricious with me, and like I say, you can't tell when history is being made that it is going to be history, anything of historical notes. So anyway, we were holed up in the police station, and in Samara, the ancient city of Samara, and of course, Saddam Hussein had run with an iron fist, had run Iraq with an iron hand, okay, just like Stalin, Joseph Stalin ran Russia, okay, for 35 years, okay, he ran things. And all of a sudden, when you remove that power vacuum, people aren't quite sure how to act or react and so forth. So in Samara, the first few weeks were pretty quiet.
Now,
everybody was glad to see us.
Well, just to put this in context again, though, really quick. I mean, it was the right after the first week of April in 2003 that we were treated to the images of the Saddam Hussein statue falling and all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
And this was so, but this is a little bit just shortly after that, right?
Yes, this is into May.
Okay.
so there we are, little intelligence team sitting there, and I'm praying that we don't do something stupid. You know, I was in my early 40s at the time, and I was with a bunch of 20-something-year-olds, and I was praying that we didn't do something really stupid, okay? But we just couldn't resist, all right? We started getting these very odd messages, and intel messages saying, "Look, we're receiving attacks, and we need to start having these enhanced interrogation sessions." Whatever enhanced interrogation means, I don't know. I still don't know. Okay, even when I was being strapped to a stretcher and tortured myself by my own people, I still don't know what an enhanced interrogation is. Okay, but anyway, I was the medic, and it was my job to where if we picked up people and interrogated them, it was my job to pick up the pieces. And quite often there were pieces. All right, when you tie somebody to the hood of a Humvee naked, drive around town in 125 degrees, okay, there's hardly anything left of them when they return. Okay, when you stage false executions and so forth, there's hardly anything left. I had 15-year-olds, and everybody thinks, boy, if I'd been there, I'd be torturing Haji. Oh, yeah, let me at him. Okay. Well, when you see a 15-year-old go into cardiac arrest because he was caught out after dark by our forces there in Samara, and he is in a cardiac arrest, okay, you tend to think about things quite a bit differently, okay? And when you see the reaction from the community saying, whoa, hold on a sec. We allowed you people to come in here. You didn't say anything about torturing our children, kidnapping our children, or killing us, okay? You didn't say anything about that. Right. And here you are doing it, all right? And so with that in mind, I had to take over medical duties, and being a medic and a doctor, there's a bit of a, paradox between my people who are there trying to do a mission, okay, intelligence work, and the disaster that they were creating, all right? And so I had to, for example, okay, and one morning I had to deal with 4 separate cardiac arrests from people being interrogated in our hands, in our control. Okay. Right. Now I know all the, as my court case shows. Okay. Now I know all the nonsense about these pious, phony, baloney lawyers sitting around saying, "Oh, well, you can cause somebody enough pain to where they have organ failure, then you have to stop." Okay. Well, if you think about that, it doesn't get any more stupid than that, okay? To describe to somebody who's sitting out in a burned-out police station in a war zone to interrogate somebody to the point to where they have organ failure. Just say that. I hope you're listening. Just say that organ failure is the point you're supposed to stop, okay? When you're torturing somebody, okay? So. Anyway,
and this goes far beyond the sort of cursory story that was passed around regarding Abu Ghraib's and the whole well, gee, they humiliated them by putting bags over their heads and by threatening them verbally and all this kind of stuff, which is really what is left of that story at this point in time. But there was a whole lot more going on there, wasn't there?
Well, garroting, burning. Broken bones, dislocations, you name it, okay, it was going on, all right? And when I have to deal, I should not, medicine is something that if you have to work at doing it, okay, there's been a failure, okay, in the environment, all right? As an intelligence operative medic, I should not have been responsible for having to revive 15-year-olds and 14-year-olds that were in full cardiac arrest from our interrogations, all right? So, needless to say, because I was running my intelligence operatives, and I had some excellent intelligence operatives out there, my sources, okay? My source net was just beyond, exemplary. Okay, we were getting just dazzling intelligence, from my people, all right, my Iraqis, okay? They were giving us just incredible things. And it's the kind of thing you don't see on TV. Most people think of intelligence agents standing around 3 a.m. with a trench coat on and wearing a fedora. Okay, right. They don't see the 6 to 7 to 10 hours of report writing that goes into every single day. Okay, for this stuff, but this stuff was dazzling and it was fabulous. Okay, and I one of my sources was an Egyptian attorney who had worked for Halliburton. Yes, I hope some ears are perking up because I didn't stutter there either. Halliburton Corporation, and he came in. He took me aside one day, wanted to have a cup of tea, and he said, "Look," he said, "I can see you're being bothered by the torture business." Okay. And I well, of course I am. I'm not supposed to be, having to revive most of the people that we bring in for interrogation. All right. Fortunately, I hadn't lost anybody, but that was soon to change. Okay. As two little boys that had been interrogated on a bridge. Now, the bridge at Samara incident is famous now. You can look that up, instantly. Okay, the bridge at Samara, and these little boys had been interrogated and then thrown off the bridge into the Tigris River, and they drowned. Okay, so that changed the complete composite of our relationship with the city of Samara. But the attorney said, "Look," he said, "you don't seem to understand something here. I translated, from Arabic to English, English to Arabic, this same situation in the first Gulf War. What are you talking about?" And he said, "This was a study that was done, by the RAND study group, and Halliburton was part of it, paying for the study actually. King Khalid Air Base, all right, King Khalid Air Base, Saudi Arabia, and the whole proposal of torture was brought up there to study not only the effects on the victim, but also the effects on the people who have to torture. And for those of you out there listening, we have more people, more soldiers that have committed suicide and blown their brains out, like 30 every day blow their brains out because they were exposed to issues like this, issues of torture that are not germane to our Western culture. We don't think in those terms. But they were exposed to it, all right? And so this lawyer said, "Look," he said, this was designed to be a diversion. Diversion from what? A diversion, in this case, happens to be Halliburton's shipping of refined petroleum products out of Iraq and subsequently they are to be sent to U.S. shores. I said, "Well, what's the problem with that?" And he said, "Remember I said war profiteering scheme? That is the biggest war profiteering scheme ever developed in U.S. history, and it is using the subject of torture to divert the entire world's attention from what's going on. The whole world should not be looking at Abu Ghraib." By the way, my command had moved to Abu Ghraib, and they set up, the infamous photos. Those were all my command's photos,
and to put this in context, there was also, the changes, and there's various reports that have come from many veterans who have actually come out publicly who have discussed this, to say that, the rules of engagement were not being observed properly. There were basically, there was sort of an atmosphere of I don't know how to put this except to say that there's like an atmosphere of lawlessness that kind of existed in that theater. At least to the best of my knowledge at this point, that there was a change in the way that the civilian population was being treated, not only in their interrogations, but in the way they were engaged, in the way they were confronted and dealt with on the street. There was just this sort of, like I say again, like a lawless kind of atmosphere that took over in this entire affair. Am I right?
The first 3 months, Chuck, and for your listeners, were pretty nice, really. Okay, forget all the shock and awe nonsense. Okay, that was all for the American consumers. Footing your tax bill, keep those tax dollars coming in so we can do more of this. Okay, that's what that was for. But the first 3 months were basically, truly, a honeymoon. Okay, and like I said, we began to sense some very odd vibrations coming from our own people, not from the Iraqis. Every war should be fought, with a people as congenial as the Iraqis. Okay, they were very pleasant. Okay, don't let any of the CNN nonsense, wild-eyed nonsense, fool you. Okay, they're well educated, they're polyglot, they were very pleasant. Okay, and they reacted to us the way we would react to any foreign invader doing what was being done to them. It's just that simple. Okay, it's broken down anthroposophically in those terms correctly. All right, and so we ended up. Okay, now yes, there was a sense of lawlessness. There was supposed to be a war profiteering member or agency from the Inspector General's office in the Department of Defense, and this has to do with that oil profiteering scheme that I just brought up. And what was happening, it was so monstrous that we can't even talk about it today, really, okay, without everybody shaking their heads saying, no, our company, our government wouldn't do what they did to us in Iraq. Okay, they just wouldn't do it. Okay, well, for your listeners, guess what? They did. Did anybody notice the price of gas coming down at the pump? No, it did not, for a reason. Remember George Bush saying, well, somebody's got to pay for this war. Yeah, we can do that, with the extra fuel that we're going to get from Iraq. Well, here's what was going on. Here's why people were seeing back here, seeing all kinds of prurient pictures of torture going on in places like Abu Ghraib and so forth, was this. Those were intentionally designed for the American public to look at and to pay attention to, because there are 5 super refineries in Iraq. Okay, I can say this with confidence that that there has not been an American refinery built in the last 40 years. Okay, they're all old, antiquated, but in Iraq they had brand new ones. Okay, plenty of money, and these things float, all computerized, and this is the subject matter that when we talk about ISIS today, look where ISIS is controlling, the area that is controlling, are those refineries and those oil fields. They don't care about, controlling a bunch of empty desert. Who cares? Okay? No, they're controlling those oil fields to the tune of $1 million a day profit is what they're making. I mean, we're never going to see the end of ISIS, folks. But anyway, what was happening was our own government, care of Halliburton Corporation, was loading refined petroleum products. And I will challenge anybody to contest this, all right? They were loading refined products, broken down petroleum products, diesel, JP4, regular gasoline, tar, sludge, who knows, okay? Loading it on the ships, and they were headed to the U.S. shores, okay? And everybody says, well, that's not so bad. Gosh, they offloaded on U.S. shores. Oh, no, this is called sleight of hand, pulling a rabbit out of a hat, and only Dick Cheney, somebody who was used to stealing millions of dollars a year in transportation taxes from the state of Wyoming, could do the same thing on a massive global scale, okay? He was doing this to the American people. The ships were coming to U.S. shores at the site of refineries, okay, on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
But something very strange happened. Not one of those ships ever offloaded those refined products, okay? They went to refineries, but they were carrying refined products. Hopefully your audience is sharp enough to see the incongruity of that statement. Why would they be carrying refined oil products, Chuck? Okay? Because here's what was going on. Was all oil shipments and petroleum shipments have to have what's called a petromet number, okay? And so what they would do is they'd come to U.S. shores, take a GPS fix, log on the petro shipment license that this load had been delivered, never offloading a single drop, okay, of refined petroleum products, and then going as fast as they could back to the Persian Gulf and offloading it again in Kuwait City. And right now, as back then, there were approximately 40 separate U.S. military bases and 2 great big massive wars going on, and the profit margin was comfortably, for Halliburton, first of all, they were paid for the oil that was not processed, okay, because they used Iraqi petroleum to be the refineries to break the petroleum down, but they sent it back to refined product and sold it to our military services at 2,000 to 3,000% markup per unit, as in 2,000 to 3,000% per gallon of gas. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that was the greatest war profiteering scheme. And guess what? There was one person who got onto it, okay, and that was Colonel Ted Vanderhoozing. Now, if you were to look that name up, you will see Ted Vanderhoozing, R.I.P., all right? Because he came home, he got wind of it, he came home, he told his family, this is the last time you're going to see me alive. Something is horrifically wrong in Iraq. And he returned. He came home on 2 weeks later. He went back, and he was dead within 8 hours of his return. To quote, suicide. Okay, he was alone in his. He had a trailer he was residing in, and somebody just heard a shot. You know, the usual. Okay, death by his own firearm. All right.
Of course.
So that was the. And he was never replaced. His job as Inspector General for war profiteering was never replaced. There was no war profiteering inspectors, which is critical in wartime. Gee, imagine war profiteering going on, okay, in any war, all right? Well, this one, it went unchecked in Iraq. There were thousands and thousands of millionaires made in Iraq. All right, and we won't mention how much money the Carlyle Group made, or the Bush crime family made. All right, we won't mention that. All right, but the fact is that thousands and thousands of millionaires were made. All right, and then, gee, that was so good that what are we going to do? We're gonna just create another troublemaking group, and we'll call it ISIS. Mm-hmm. And we will restart this thing again, and we'll be right back in. And look how little investment it took to get that to happen, Chuck.
Oh yeah, that wasn't very difficult at all. All you had to do is allow them to capture some weapons in particular strategic points. Give them the play in the media so that they could be blown up into something much bigger than they actually are. And you've got worldwide coverage, you've got attention, you have yet again the resurgence of the concept of the coalition of the willing, right? All of this stuff once again.
Right back into it.
Okay, back into it. Now, before we go any further, though, because I don't want to skip this, because this has something to do with the court case that's going on. When we're talking about, your observations regarding torture and everything else. I mean, I'm sure that some of my listeners are wondering, what were you doing at that time besides, obviously having your hands full, reviving people, trying to repair injuries, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, what were you doing? I mean, were you reporting this to your superiors? Were you explaining that you were, completely disillusioned with this idea, that this was not accomplishing what it should have been, that this was improper? I mean, what were you doing?
Well, okay. If I might segue something in, okay, to that.
Sure.
All right. If your listeners don't mind, and this has to do with what is going on as we're saying this. What is going on? Okay, what this show is going on. Okay, about 3 a.m. one morning. Okay, when you're fighting a war and you're in intelligence, it's like it always seems like you're awake. Okay, it doesn't matter what time of day or night it is. You're always awake. And one of my sources, who had been absolutely incredible, he showed up and he was wild-eyed. Okay, and he said, look, he said, I need you to recruit somebody. I said, whoa, hold on a sec here. Okay, you need me to recruit somebody? I recruited him, but he needed me to recruit somebody. And he said, go ahead, notify your people to do a background check on these two people. Actually, it turned out to be 3.
Okay.
And the first person, and I want everybody to turn up the volume on their radio, okay, and on their little computer speaker boxes, okay. The first name was Abdullah Talabani. And my name might not ring any bells except for this. He was a Kurd, and he went on to become the first president of Kurdistan, okay? Mm-hmm. And that's important, okay? That, we talk about recruiting popes and lamas, okay? Well, guess what, okay? That was the first president of Kurdistan. And then the second was somebody named, and I'm not stuttering, okay, a little drum roll here, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. All right? You want to take it from there, Chuck? You know who that is, and I'm sure your listeners know who that is.
Well, absolutely, but I want to know what you knew about him at the time, because this makes it also very interesting.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. Turns out that Mr. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was the head of Mukhabarat. All right. All operations that destroyed us, that really took their toll on us in Iraq, were directed and run by Mukhabarat. Mukhabarat is, especially in Samarra, okay, is the Hussein intelligence agency that is feared, very capable, very sharp, nobody's fool, in any definition of the term. All right, Russian trained. Most of the people from the GRU, Russian GRU, and the Russian KGB trained the Mukhabarat. They have the duties of counterintelligence, keeping Hussein in power, and they have the intelligence of identifying any potential enemies, foreign or domestic, in Iraq. So that means they know exactly what's going on.
And this is long after this is what evolved from the Ba'ath Party intelligence people and everything else that Hussein had previous. Right. And it was actually a very effective intelligence agency, again, kind of underrated sort of on the world stage, but extremely effective. This is exactly, his secret police, for lack of a better word, that were able to really exert his will upon the people. This is where it actually all comes from. It wasn't just one guy who was able to control the military and his feared, and I hold up air quotes at this point, Republican Guard. Okay, it wasn't just this. It was this intelligence agency that we're talking about here.
Yes, it's all pervasive. It is the central nervous system of the Hussein regime in Iraq. And this will tie things in. I'm sure that everybody's beginning to say, well, okay, I can kind of see a pattern forming here. Well, it turns out that all weapons of mass destruction were under the control of Mukhabarat. All money transfers, gold transfers and so forth, were handled through the Mukhabarat. And they had a sister group of Mukhabarat in a now very popular place called Syria. All right? So the head of ISIS, okay, is Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. And if anybody was wondering over the last 2 weeks why these people are so effective, even though mathematics is my hobby, okay, I'm not always the best at it, okay. And 2.5, 3 weeks ago now, I heard the news. They said that 1,500 men had come into Iraq and managed to wipe out virtually all the Shia army and the Shia constabulary that were there, okay, and send them packing, all right. 1,500 men, okay, what is that, about the size of a little bit bigger than a brigade, okay, of men. And so that's hardly anything, okay, in a place the size of Iraq. But they'd come in from Syria. And these people just didn't show up and say, okay, what are we going to shoot up now? Let's go grab this guy over here. No, I saw some footage, and that affirmed everything I suspected, that they had lists, okay? They knew exactly whose door to knock on, whose head to put a bullet in, whose head to cut off, okay? By the way, that's no big thing anymore, okay, cutting somebody's head off, all right? They knew exactly who to do what to whom, and which means that ISIS is operating on Mukhabarat intelligence networks, and that Mukhabarat goes from Syria all the way across Iraq. And there's nothing that they don't know about those two countries and who's doing what to whom and how to get money for this whole operation. They are, as a result, they know how to get money. They know how to identify everyone that's involved in this whole power vacuum called Iraq, Mesopotamia, as you will, all right? And they are there to stay. And another thing, too, for your listeners, guess who is financing their initial forays into putting this whole thing together? The Prince Bandar of Saudi Arabia, all right? The same people that paid for 9/11, the same people that paid for 9/11, okay, are paying for ISIS. And guess who is jumping in their planes, very expensive planes that the taxpayers have paid for, of course, and dropping bombs on these, trying to drop bombs on these folks? Okay, excuse me, the Khorasan group, okay? I thought Khorasan was a floor covering for my kitchen, okay, or my countertops, okay? No, it's the Khorasan group today that got bombs dropped on them, okay? But the deal is that the financing has been through Saudi Arabia, and everybody, oh no, they wouldn't do that to us again. Gee, remember 9/11, everybody? Okay, well, okay, the Saudis paid for it, and the Israelis executed 9/11, and then here they are putting us into another fight again because it makes so much money. And the Saudis, okay, know this, the Saudis know this, is that the oil that is in Iraq, okay, is the sweetest oil on earth. That means that there's no sulfur content in the oil, or low sulfur content in the Iraqi oil, and the reserves are barely even touched. The reserves in Iraq dwarf all the other Middle East countries, including Saudi Arabia's, oil reserves put together. That's what is in Iraq. So what would happen if those oil fields were introduced to the market in an uncontrolled fashion? What would that do to Saudi oil prices? The floor you're sitting on, okay, well that would be the starting level of the oil, price of oil for Saudi crude. All right, that would go right through the floor. Okay, so guess what? They are able to pay a highly trained, highly motivated group of hotheads to use American weapons to go in, use Mukhabarat intelligence in both Syria and Iraq. They control the fields in Syria and Iraq now, and I'll put money out there right now, good money, that not a single oil technician has had his head cut off in either country. Not a single oil or petroleum engineer has been threatened in any way. Okay.
Oh yeah.
And or taken off the job. All right. I'll put money on. Anybody want to bet on that? That's out in your listener audience.
I certainly don't feel like betting against that, because that's exactly, you're not going to cut your nose off to spite your face. This is exactly what the deal is. But see, we're already an hour and 25 deep here. Okay, just so you know, and I do want to get to the court case, like I said, because this is something else that we haven't even touched upon yet. Exactly. I mean, we've touched upon a lot of the stuff that went into it, that's for sure, and your declaration, of course, but we haven't really delved into the totality of what's going on here. Now, if you take all the things that we've discussed so far, excise from it the current events. But if you just take what we've discussed so far and think about this, like I said, this is why I was asking you what it was you were doing at the time of the torture, right, and all of this, because this is very relevant to the case.
You bet. And what a case it is. I think you'll agree it's quite a case. Okay, in the California courts. Okay, your listeners can look up my case, and I encourage all of them to do exactly that. All right, because they'll find that they've been lied to by a big chunk of our government, and all the issues concerning human rights and so forth were brought to bear in my case. Okay, we don't have much time, so if you would like, I'll make it quick, Chuck. Okay.
No, go right ahead.
But I'll try to make it fast. Okay.
But I don't want to leave out, your personal experience there, how it ended up in all of this, and of course. There's the initial filing, by the way, just so everybody knows. If you find the court case, regarding Frank Gregory Ford, and you see that it's, just versus the United States at all, this is not the whole case. You got to find the other one where there are defendants named, okay, outside of it. The initial one, right. The initial opening brief that you might find from, which I think is dated 2012. Well, I think that's what it was dated.
Right. The opening brief, opening brief to the Ninth Circuit Court was filed last week, and that named everyone of the defendants. And your listeners will find out when they pull up the defendants' names, they'll recognize those defendants' names. Okay, from the Abu Ghraib scandal. Now, as I had stated, my command had moved to Abu Ghraib. And one of the situations that brought me to loggerheads with command was the other person that I recruited, okay, to work for us was a person called Abu Sager, okay? Abu Sager was, fascinating story and all of this. Abu Sager, Ali Saad Hassan, had a daughter who was the mistress of Saddam Hussein. And Abu Sager was the trusted banker of Saddam Hussein, the trusted banker, and had run intelligence operations, counterintelligence operations, for Hussein. So my source came to me and said, at 3 a.m, he wanted me to recruit all these people, but he said, do not let this guy get out of town. Okay, we've got to grab him fast, because he has the entire financial scheme between the banks, the Iraqi banks, and the American banks that financed the purchase of weapons of mass destruction for Iraq. He set the whole thing up. He's Hussein's banker. And so I we immediately were able to get our hands on Abu Sager, and which was quite an episode in itself. And he informed me of all of this that I've informed your listeners of, is that, yes, the Bachi Bank was responsible. Bank of Credit and Commerce International was responsible for financing weapons of mass destruction purchase for Iraq through American banks. All right? So that, needless to say, that didn't sit well with my command. Okay, to have probably the premier intelligence source fall into our hands before we could shut him up. He was giving me information. And by the way, for your listeners, to find out what happened to this man, if they type in his name, they will find out what happened to him. He was beaten to death by our Central Intelligence Agency. Before he could really expose what was really going on, he was beaten to death, and I had to identify his body. All right. So, needless to say, I had to file charges. I filed charges for torture and abuse, okay, that were being done by my own team, and they centered around Abu Sager, but they also centered around our prisoners. I don't call them detainees, that phony baloney term that the Bush administration invented. They're called prisoners, all right? I filed the charges, and the command came to me. This was Colonel Thomas Pappas, the infamous Colonel Thomas Pappas, Pappas. Anybody wants to look him up, and Colonel Ryan, Timothy Ryan, and by the way, Timothy Ryan and Victor Artiga, okay, are now working for the Carlyle Group, okay, one of the subsidiaries of the Carlyle Group, but that's who they're working for now. Okay?
Coincidentally,
any connection to any of this? Okay. So anyway, and they informed me, they said, look, you either withdraw these charges and we'll forget the whole thing, or, it's going to go very, very hard on you. I said, no. When you look at somebody that trusted you and was beaten to death, okay, by your own people, and watched children being thrown from a bridge that had been tortured a few minutes before, and then had to revive children that had succumbed to heart attacks during torture, okay, no, all deals are off. And so I told them all deals are off, and they said, fine, okay, you are now declared, what was it? Suffering from combat fatigue. Okay, one of those euphemisms that the military and government likes to come up with. And I said, don't even try it. And I immediately contacted my lawyer, my attorney. I had an attorney standing by. By the way, anybody considering a career in intelligence, this is the best advice I can give you: is always have a lawyer on retainer. Okay? Everybody laughs about it, but I did, and I'm alive today as a result. Okay? Right. My attorney immediately contacted the commander of the Southwest Asian Command, General Stan McChrystal, and Stan McChrystal contacted the unit and said, I better leave Iraq breathing. No bullet holes in my head like Pat Tillman. No, I wasn't going to get Tillman. No. And so I left Iraq strapped to a stretcher, with a psychiatrist sitting right next to me, all right, by the name of Merle Madera, one of the defendants in my case, by the way, and she and another assistant did the only medical malpractice issue that you can do in military medicine. They allowed the command of the 205th, the infamous 205th, to dictate my medical condition and terms of treatment, which was torture. Okay, they were going to find out through the use and applications of CIA, outlawed CIA interrogation drugs, what I knew and who I'd spoken to, okay, about the torture issue. Okay, and I didn't know it at this time, but the torture issue was actually evolving into a revenue generation system called Copper Green. Type in the name Copper Green and watch what happens, folks. Okay? Copper Green. All right? It's alive and well today. But they wanted to know if there was a threat to that program called Copper Green. So, anyway, I was tortured and flown out through German airspace. The German government was deceived, intentionally deceived. They found out later, and they considered it an act of war, by the way. And I was taken to Germany, released in Germany, and I was able to, I had to speak to a psychiatrist there, and he said, his first response was, I felt kind of bad for him. He said, "What is this disaster?" And I said, "We are torturing people on an industrial basis, and it is going to be the greatest war crime scandal in American history." He said, "I believe it." He said, "You don't want to go back with this unit, do you?" And I said, "Colonel, do you think I'm crazy?" He said, "No, I didn't think so." He said, "You're out of here." And so he put me on a plane, escorted me to a plane, made sure I wasn't strapped to a stretcher this time and tortured. And I was flown into San Antonio, Texas, where the Fort Sam Houston Medical Facility, Brooke Army Medical Facility, actually heard my story, and they launched an immediate government investigation into what happened. And I returned, and a few weeks later, something called 60 Minutes. Okay, 60 Minutes was releasing video footage of my unit. Okay, and I knew all those kids that were involved in Abu Ghraib, that ones that went to prison. Okay, and it became overnight. It became the greatest war crime scandal in American history. And so, since that point, of course, I watched our government immediately start pointing fingers, especially at me. Okay, especially at me. I think, as you found, Chuck, they said I was all kinds of bad things, crazy, nuts, out of my mind, and then the story started to change a little bit. But now, especially since I have filed a legal case, and it is the only legal case of an intelligence operative filing on war crimes, okay, to come into the court system. So at this point, that's where I am, and I would invite any of your listeners to look up my court case. It's the Ford versus Artiga, Artiga case in the Ninth Circuit Court, and my opening brief, everyone should see, everyone should read, and you're going to love the statement of declaration by somebody who's now famous from your neck of the woods back there. She's actually in South Carolina, but that's Brigadier General Janice Karpinski. Brigadier General Janice Karpinski states that there never would have been a war crime scandal. This never would have happened if my reports had reached her, and I never would have been abducted and tortured like I was. So,
it's extremely noteworthy that you are the only intelligence operative that I've ever known of to be renditioned that survived, first of all. Secondly, Janice Karpinski is the only flag officer, to my knowledge, to ever lose her star like this. And I wondered if you would elaborate on those two things as well.
Oh, sure. Well, you're right. It's I don't know if any other intelligence operative was dumb enough to stand up and do what was right when he was supposed to. But like I said, fortunately, I had a legal firm behind me that I was able to contact within minutes after this started to unfold, and which responded immediately to get me out of Iraq alive. Okay, and if I hadn't, I would have been the victim of a friendly fire, what they call friendly fire case. All right, I would have been racked up along with the other 30 soldiers or so a day that are now committing suicide as a result of what they have experienced in Iraq and Afghanistan. More soldiers have died by their own hands in this war than actually fell to the hands of the enemy during both wars. Right. And then of course, I didn't have to sell this situation to Brigadier General Janice Karpinski because my own command had set her up. All right. Colonel Pappas answered to Brigadier General Janice Karpinski, and I'm sure virtually all your listeners know who she is. All right. And this little twerp, Pappas, and his little rodents, that answered to him, they conspired to keep my reports from her, and then when the disaster unfolded, proceeded to set her up. Okay. And that was absolutely true and correct. What you said is that she is the only general in U.S. history, the entire history of modern history of warfare and U.S. history, to lose her star. Okay, she didn't lose it for long because she had the goods on him, thanks to me. But she did lose her star, and it was returned. But the onus had been placed on her as being irresponsible and not knowing what was going on in her own command when some of the greatest war crimes were going on and being kept from her. And so she has now supported me in this case, and that's the first time that's really happened. So this case is of itself a spectacular issue of testing, what it means to be American, be an American, what it means to be, aware of your human rights and the responsibilities and civil rights that those entail, and making sure our government doesn't treat those in a laissez-faire whenever they feel like obeying them, which pretty much they have so far, that they obey their own laws. We have something called the U.S. Attorney's Office, which the sole reason for its existence is to make sure that the government of America can break any law it wants and not ever have to pay a price for it. Okay, and that is my adversary right now. It's the U.S. Attorney's Office. They wrote the torture memos, and they have been the antagonists against me. Complete with a slander campaign, the whole bit. Oh, you're this, you're that, ha ha, laugh, laugh. Okay. Well, yes, I have on my court case, for the first time, I have actually requested the courts remove the U.S. Attorney's Office from this case because they are preventing the actual legal due process for justice to be administered.
And, one other thing that's remarkable here is if you read the court brief, the more recent filing, as I said before, you can actually get a sense of the general's own statement here as well. I wonder if you wanted to elaborate on that a little bit.
Wow. Okay. Well, the interesting thing about the general is I was, how often does an intelligence operative get to actually have a face-to-face with their own general? Okay. She was so many levels above me. But the thing is, it wasn't until all this happened that I was able to contact her. And to be quite honest, Chuck, we've been able to fill in so much of what happened in Kurdistan, in Iraq, these big gaps of information and intelligence. And she has said, I had no idea this was going on in my own command, okay, until I spoke to you just now. She had no idea, all right? And if that had been going on, things would have been dramatically different, and we probably would have a lot less lives lost. And I think I mentioned this to you as a result of the Abu Ghraib revelations. If you don't take it serious, you should, after I tell you this, is that we have not had a single American prisoner that was taken prisoner in Iraq returned alive after Abu Ghraib. So I don't know how many that would be, but that's quite a few that they could have been returned to us alive if the disaster of Abu Ghraib, hadn't taken place, and General Janice Karpinski had been informed of my reports and my charges. It never would have happened. And
really quickly, it does occur to me as well that, there is the Universal Code of Military Justice, which was completely circumvented here as well, because to my knowledge, outside of some of the intelligence team that was directly implicated, through photographic evidence and such, the majority of their superiors have actually not been punished with any sort of significant censure of any type, except obviously the sacrificial lamb in this case. General Karpinski was punished, obviously, but outside of that, we haven't seen that sort of reverberate down, a little further downhill, have
we? Pardon the chest cold, Chuck, but yes, you're absolutely correct. And that is the second sentence in my opening brief, is that in U.S. history, this has never happened, where every single level of the chain of command, the military chain of command, the UCMJ, Uniform Code of Military Justice, was abrogated at every single level and compromised and corrupted, all the way from my level all the way to the Oval Office of the United States of America. Every single level was involved in the corruption, the cover-up of Abu Ghraib prison. And that includes the House Senate Committee on Intelligence and Collection, chaired by Dianne Feinstein, Senator Feinstein out here. That included the Inspector General's Office of the Department of Defense, headed up by then the scandalous person called Joe Schmitz, who did his best to cover up my case, dismantle my investigations in my case. All right, if in every single level of authority and redress, my case was abrogated. All right, so that's why I, for the first time, I was able to show that, demonstrate that there was no level of redress, with these charges. These are war crimes charges, Chuck. I mean, unless you're in the military, you can't understand the full import of them and impact, but most civilians really can. Type in war crimes and see what happens on your computer. Type in war atrocities and see what happens.
Well, right, and let's just throw another little brick out there, because we are down to the last 10 minutes, but let's consider this. There are individuals who are being held responsible as war criminals in other countries by international courts, and even have warrants through Interpol at this point. And I'm sure that you will be more than happy to talk about that for a minute.
Sure. Yes, we have acknowledged international war criminals. All right. And I'm sure everybody knows these names. Okay, first one is George W. Bush. He was designated a war criminal by the International Human Rights Commission at The Hague, and also the International Human Rights Commission at Singapore, Malaysia. All right, they've been designated war criminals, guilty of war atrocities, and as a result, they cannot leave the United States without facing an Interpol warrant for their arrest. Okay, there was a case not too long ago where George, he got on a plane. He was going to go fly to Germany and go do something or other. And the way this was presented to me, when these things happen, I usually get a phone call. And he was halfway there when they got the word that Interpol was waiting for him on the ground, and they were going to slap the irons on him. Hook him up, hook the bracelets on him. And of course, the plane turned around and came back, to U.S. airspace, and that was that. Now, I can see that with George. I can understand that with George. Now, I don't think too many people have a problem with that. Now, Dick Cheney, yes, that should have been done a long time ago. And when people, Wyoming, wake up and realize how much money he took from not paying transportation taxes between Casper and Cheyenne, they'll slap the bracelets on him themselves. All right. And then, of course, my last but not least appreciated is my original boss, Donald Rumsfeld. Okay, gee, imagine Don being involved in something like this. But yes, he is the acknowledged international war criminal himself too. So they call him the unholy troika. All right, the Three Musketeers. There they are. So isn't that an interesting way for three former wartime politicians to end up, on the Interpol's most wanted list for being war criminals?
Well, no wonder, considering, we know about Donald Rumsfeld's ties to, the use of aspartame and all these other interesting chemical compounds when he was in the private sector. Cheney and Rumsfeld both having been continuously inserted into various administrations or regimes at this point, for various dubious reasons. Both of them are definitely not a surprise as far as this goes, in my opinion, anyway. And like I did say, we are running low on time, so. If there's anything else that you want to get to, because I didn't take calls because we kind of just ran right through the time. And, I do want to thank you for coming on tonight, because I find all of this extremely enlightening. And of course, the joke that I once made a long time ago, and many people made it, I'm not the only one, who said, of course we know that Iraq will have these weapons of mass destruction. And this is when we were first invading, of course, this was one of those things we made a joke saying, well, of course we know that they have the weapons of mass destruction because we probably still have the receipts somewhere. Seems to be a little closer to the truth than we might have realized at the time. Of course, it was pinned on a failure of intelligence, suspiciously the same sort of failure of intelligence that caused them to not know about the attacks of 9/11. And so on and so on. And yet, the more they play the same old song, it seems as though the tune doesn't really change, does it? And we're now confronted with ISIS, which is yet again another group that we have, in one way or another, supported in a clandestine manner and built up for our own purposes to once again go in and exploit a part of the world and continue on with our battle with remember this phrase, the axis of evil. We're now going to continue on with that. And of course, like you said before, that sort of pat on the back, that sort of wink of the eye that was given, regarding, let's just say, the racist kind of construct of it's perfectly okay to torture, destroy, kill, murder, wipe out these people, those people, because after all, that's perfectly fine and dandy. But of course, the damage done to the American people, the damage done to our own people, not even really taking into account the damage to those in the foreign lands. I hold up my hands again. This is just yet again more of the same, in my opinion. And it's just really extremely enlightening to have you on. And like I said, I'd like to kind of give you the last couple of words here before I do my little outro and my obnoxious bumper kicks in and knocks me off the air. So anything else you'd like to add, please go right ahead.
Well, I can say this, is that I have a bumper sticker on one of my vehicles, and the bumper sticker says, "Since when did patriotism become obedience to corporate profits?" And after being in this situation, I couldn't think of a better way to think about patriotism in my country than that right there. All right, that's what I ask. And by the way, I don't know if we have time to ask for anybody to call in with a question, but I'd love to field a question or two if we do have time. There's always somebody that wants to know something, so I'd be more than welcome to answer any questions if I can.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're really going to get to anybody, but you guys have the call-in number, and anybody who has me on the Skype list, you can just drop in too. I'll be more than happy to accept you onto the call, but there are only a few minutes left. And I do want to thank everybody for listening, because again, I say that this is important information. This is, this is the real deal. This is not the crap that they're feeding you on the alphabet soup of, corporate controlled media. This is something else. And, like I said, some of this stuff was hard for me to swallow, to be honest with you, and was kind of shocking. But at the same time, it also sort of confirmed and filled in the gaps for these things that I really was shaking my head about for the past few years regarding this situation, and how the public seems to acquiesce and give in immediately to these notions that they're propagandized with. So I find it extremely enlightening, and it is as it is. I mean, and I really do encourage everybody, please do look that up. The later filing in the Ninth Circuit Court of Frank Gregory Ford, and that's a little bit of a mouthful for me. And I usually trip over my tongue during my broadcasts here, but I didn't do it too much today because really I wanted Mr. Ford to be able to speak to you, and as the advice that was given to me by a friend was, let him tell his truth as much as you can and try to stay out of the way of it. And believe me, that's what I tried to do here tonight. And I hope that this was a little different, because I did hear you on Ground Zero Radio with Clyde Lewis, which is sort of very commercial and has a lot of breaks and things. And I didn't think that the totality of your story really got out there on that recent interview. And this is also, it also kind of made me stand up and pay attention again when I heard some things that were incongruous with what I understood about the general narrative relating to our adventures in the Middle East in general. So, I can't thank you enough.
Chuck, well, thank you for having me. And one of the things, though, that, in the last 36 hours, I've had almost 5 shows. And one of the things I really try to get out there is, first of all, I try to reach people that are not victims of the Leave No Child Behind, or as I call it, the Leave No Imbecile Behind of George W. Bush, their education programs. Those people don't know how to think, okay? But my biggest concern is that there's issues that affect the American people, like 9/11, and there's issues with this group, ISIS, having weapons of mass destruction in their possession, and the American people need to be notified. I don't want to see another convenient Pearl Harbor, okay? I don't want to see another convenient 9/11, all right? I need to get that out, and that's what I hope to do by telling people this stuff is out there, it's alive and well, and I will give them the weapons designation, but to be aware of that's the biggest thing, all right? They won't hear it on some corporate-controlled news network, no, okay? Only on heroic shows like yours that this information can get out there, okay? I know I'm in the business of, or was in the business of information control and gathering it and collecting it, analyzing it. That's what intelligence people do, okay? And I know it's shows like yours that make the difference completely.
And again, I thank you for that, and I do appreciate your time. And we may have to do this again, because I think there's a whole lot more we could go into. This was sort of abbreviated, and believe me, there's more to this story. Like I said, again, read that brief, check it out. And again, I always forget to identify my show because, toward the end of the MP3, for those of you who pick it up later downstream, you might forget who you've been listening to, but you've been listening to the Ochelli Effect. I'm Chuck Ochelli. My guest tonight, Gregory, Frank Gregory Ford, excuse me. And I urge everybody to take a look at the information that he's laid out there. And
thanks, Chuck. Good night.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
but I have the files. You know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, you know, pistols and frontal slab of choice. I don't know when that was. It doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not Jesse Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the cartoon comes from as long as it's real. It doesn't. It's hard to get real information because seriously, they don't want you